spending $90 million on a piece of art is as much a status as it is an investment strategy, and it actually appalls the old socialist in me.
Yeah,
well, I think
it does me too.
Yeah.
I mean, in the New Zealand context, I mean, we don't have the scale of market or the amount of speculation dollars around to even to consider transactions like that. But what for me, what it comes back to is about access to art, because the unfortunate reality of most good art is that it's going to cost something.
Right.
By definition, that is going to exclude a number of people from participating at an ownership level, but access through public, private. I mean, take us, for example, Street Front Gallery on Cuba Street, glass, 24 hours. It operates as a public space, and it's free. So the access point really, I think, is what we ought to be considering
Raven?
in New Zealand context.
So the thing that leapt out about this thing is that the $91 million purchase was made by the father of Steve Mnuchin, the US Treasury Secretary.
Okay.
Who, used to work at Goldman Sachs and is sort of obviously part of Trump's regime. And so it's just, it's all very well to spend your money on whatever you like, but the fact that this guy has this 91 million, I think, is really a very strong argument for some form of genuine, sincere taxation that's not happening in America.
It's interesting.
Ain't going to happen on Trump's watch.
No. David?
But that's a good point with this method of sale as well at an auction. I mean, the living artist, and that's exceptional that a living artist is fetching that price. But in terms of the return of profit to the artist, unless there's some sort of tag-along agreement where the artist will receive a proceed of profit that's generated from the sale, it's likely actually that the artist hasn't got anything extra out of it, that the person who's actually made all the money is the person who sat on it. It was the owner of the magazine, Empire, from memory.
No. And before you go, quick tip for those who do want to buy a little quality piece of New Zealand art but don't have sort of thousands and thousands. There are places to go, aren't there, that you can buy a sort of an edition for a few $100 to save up over months?
Yeah, a few $100. Galleries are always, normally willing to entertain a lay-by arrangement if people are sort of genuinely wanting someone and just wanting something and need to sort of manage that a little bit. Platforms like Instagram are becoming really viable methods for artists to show their work. I mean, there's obviously never a substitute for seeing something in the flesh, but a lot of action happens on those platforms. So, yep.
Okay.
Have a good look around and you'll find something.
Very good.
I've picked up a couple of bargains at graduating exhibitions at art schools. We're lucky because we have a number of them in Auckland. And, a couple of the people, I love their work. 10, 20 years later, they're becoming much more prominent.
It's a great way to do it. Hey, David, awesome. Thanks very much for your time. We're about to end the show, and you've both been wonderful. And can I just say that we have had a huge response to your email endings. Raybon, are you really going to sign your emails at the end, someone says?
No, I actually was thinking about this. What would an influencer say at the end of an email? And so here's how I'm going to finish all my emails from now on. Your butt looks great in that.
There you go, Raven Carr,
I'm
Ella
stealing
Henry.
that.
See you later. Have a good weekend.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, an investigation's underway after 2 patients die at a secure mental health unit in just 1 week. What's gone wrong? 1 degenerative disease, 2 children, 2 different countries and 2 vastly different outlooks. We investigate. And we speak to a woman who says her life was ruined by an MSD fraud investigation, even though she was cleared in an independent review. Residents who blew the whistle on alleged assaults and sexual harassment at a social housing complex believe they're being monstered into silence. Oranga Tamariki is accused of dropping a teenage boy off at a gang pad as punishment, and it's the final countdown for the Aussie elections.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. 2 people have died at a Waitemata District Health Board mental health unit this week, sparking an immediate independent external review. The review will look at the DHB's He Puna Waiora inpatient unit in Auckland. Jessie Chang reports.
The Acting Director of Mental Health Services at the DHB, Dr. Kevin Clearly, says the families of the patients deserve answers as to why this happened. He says this kind of event should never happen in an inpatient unit. The review will focus on how the He Puna Waiora unit functions clinically, its governance and any issues relating to the facility itself. The DHB says the families of both patients have been advised of the review. The deaths will go through separate coronial investigations. Ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
The police have cordoned off part of a street in South Auckland where there have been reports of a shooting and a person has died. They were called to Piako Street in Otara just before 3 o'clock this afternoon. Flatbush School and Flatbush Kindergarten were temporarily placed in lockdown but reopened later. Cordons are in place on Piako Street. Oranga Tamariki has been accused of dropping a teenage boy off at a gang pad as punishment for being too cheeky. A Hastings man, DJ Brian, posted a video on Facebook yesterday of himself with the boy, saying he had been left at the pad by a social worker. Our Māori News correspondent, Lee Marama McLaughlin, reports.
In the video, Mr. Brian claimed the teenager had been dropped off at a pad by Oranga Tamariki. The boy said he was told that would happen if he kept being cheeky. Tens of thousands of people viewed the footage before it was taken down last night. Oranga Tamariki says the video breached privacy and could pose harm to a number of people, so it should not be shared. It says the boy is safe and it is looking into the claim but won't say any more. A leading Māori academic from Waikato University, Leone Pihama, says the claim highlights how punitive the ministry is. And the local MP for Ikarua Rapati, Mika Waitiri, says Oranga Tamariki needs to work more closely with the community. Ko Lee Marama McLaughlin tēnei.
Fines have been handed down in the Christchurch District Court over one of the country's worst helicopter crashes in recent times. All 7 of those on board the single-engine Squirrel helicopter died when it plunged into a deep crevice on Fox Glacier in 2015. They included 28-year-old pilot Mitch Gammeren and 6 tourists. The then owner of Queenstown-based Alpine Adventures, James Patrick Scott, and the company in charge of ensuring training was up to scratch, Aviation Manual Development, owned by Barry Waterland, had already pleaded guilty to breaches of the Health and Safety and Employment Act. Today, James Scott was fined $64,000. Barry Waterland's company was found to have no assets and avoided a fine due to its inability to pay. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has yet to release its report into why the crash occurred. A leading expert on brain injuries is warning that children playing tackle rugby are at higher risk of depression, anxiety and cognitive problems when they get older. Bob Cantu is the co-director of the Centre for the Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy at Boston University in the United States. He says children aged 12 and younger are much more vulnerable to the cumulative effects of head knocks.
Because the repetitive head injury is the one that is most correlated with later life behavioral, cognitive, and mood issues, that the number of hits that you take count up.
Dr. Cantu says data collected from sensors inside American football players' helmets show that after 10 years of schoolboy football, a player can have suffered about 7,000 head knocks on average. In New Zealand, children can play tackle rugby from the age of 8. The Cullen Group, owned by high-profile businessman Eric Watson, is appealing a High Court decision that made it liable to pay $112 million to Inland Revenue. In March, the court found Mr Watson deliberately avoided paying $51 million in taxes by rearranging his international business affairs. The Court of Appeal says it received Cullen Group's appeal last month. Restaurant Brands won't say how many of its stores could be closed or impacted by the strike of Unite union members this weekend. Staff at KFC, Carl's Jr. and Pizza Hut went on strike from 2 o'clock this afternoon and won't return until Monday morning. A spokesperson for Unite Union says the strike action is a response to cuts to pay and overtime and unsafe staffing levels. Restaurant Brands says its current offer to staff is ahead of or the same as other quick service restaurants. Its It says the company was the first to scrap 0-hour contracts and also moved to offer guaranteed days and fixed hours for staff. It's 5:05. The ABC is reporting that Rugby Australia has sacked Israel Folau for his controversial social media posts. The Wallabies superstar was found guilty last week of a high-level breach of his contract. New Zealand's Danny Lee has emerged as Brooke Koepka's nearest challenger after the first round of the second golf major of the year, the US PGA Championship. Koepka, the defending champion, shot a course-equalling record 63 at New York's Bethpage Black course to top the leaderboard at 7 under par, with Lee a shot back. Less than 2 years ago, Lee suffered a career-threatening back injury, waking one morning after a tournament unable to feel his legs, and he wondered if his golfing days were over.
I never had that kind of injury before, so I was freaking out and was telling my wife, okay, are we going to open up a Korean barbecue restaurant now? And she's like, hell no.
Fellow New Zealander Ryan Fox had a horror first round, shooting 8 over to be 144th. The football Ferns have been trounced 5-0 by the world's top-ranked side, the United States, in a World Cup warm-up match in Missouri. The New Zealand women's team, ranked 19th in the world, went into the match with plenty of confidence after a recent win over Norway. The US, though, were much too clinical and ruthlessly exposed New Zealand's defence weaknesses. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Country Life samples some small-town bliss after 9. Modern-day gonzo journalist David Farrier selects the mixtape. Dopra is this week's Friday night live act, recorded at Auckland's Garatos Theatre. And David McMorrin introduces us to the element phosphorus, which, because of its role as a vital ingredient in your average match, goes nicely with a sonic tonic dedicated to fire on nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7. On RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland through to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, a few showers north of Auckland City clearing today, a few showers developing tomorrow, mainly in the west. For Waitomo to Manawatu, including central high country, mainly fine today, a few showers developing tomorrow morning, becoming more frequent tomorrow night. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few coastal showers clearing today, then fine weather. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from a few showers about the western ranges of Nelson. For Bulla and Westland, fine today, rain or showers tomorrow. Otago, excluding Clutha, fine but a few showers about the lakes tomorrow. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, fine today, showers developing in Fiordland and Stewart Island later today. Rain or showers tomorrow, mainly about Fiordland and Foveau Strait. Chatham Islands, showers this evening. It's 5:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. 2 patients are suspected to have committed suicide in the space of a week at a mental health unit at the Waitemata DHB in Auckland. That's prompted the DHB to launch an independent external review of He Puna Waiora inpatient unit next to the North Shore Hospital. Dr. Kevin Cleary is the acting director of the DHB's mental health services and he joins me on the phone now. Dr. Cleary, this must be absolutely devastating for staff and for the families.
Hello, Lisa. Yes, it is. We extend our deepest sympathies to the families of those patients. We're very, very sorry for what has happened. This unit, He Puna Waiora, has been open for 4 years now, and in those 4 years up until this week, we've had no inpatient suicides, though we've had hundreds of patients successfully treated in the unit. And we've had 2 happen in a short space of 5 days or so. And for that reason, we have agreed to undertake an overarching inquiry into the unit and its functioning.
What can you tell us about these deaths? How far apart were they?
They happened this week, so over a space of 5 days.
Yes, but can you be more specific between the gap and the deaths?
5 days, Lisa.
Apart?
Yes.
Okay, so did you make any immediate changes after the first death?
We did. We have made a number of changes on the unit. immediately, and we have made some more changes today.
What are those changes?
So the changes basically have been around the environment, and I'm not going to go into great detail about that. But
have you removed bathroom doors or doors?
We have removed en-suite bathroom doors. Yes, we have. And in addition to that, we have put in extra staffing, because we know from our experience this is very traumatic for patients on the unit, for staff, and for the families of our patients. And we want to make sure that we can reduce the risk as much as possible.
Did these deaths occur at night or during the day?
They occurred in the late evening.
Okay, so what checks were happening at that time of the evening?
An inpatient mental health unit runs 24 hours a day, so the checks are the same through the day. There are regular checks on patients on their whereabouts in the unit, and then
How frequently? How frequently?
It varies from patient to patient. So the lowest level of observation would be once every hour, and then there are checks every 15 minutes and up to continuous observations, all depending on the clinical condition of the patient.
So in the case of these two patients, what monitoring regime were they on?
They were on a monitoring regime on the ward of being checked regularly by nurses. I'm not going to give you the precise detail of when they were seen. That's really for...
So you can't tell me how many, at what intervals they were checked? Were they on 10-minute checks?
I know when the patients were checked, but what I'm saying is that is for the inquiry to look into.
Okay. Let me put it another way, Dr. Cleary. Were all the checks that were scheduled to be done on these two patients done as they should have been?
And again, I'm saying I'm not going to go into the details of what was happening on the ward on the day. There were regular checks being undertaken, and that is for an inquiry to establish as to whether the checks were done appropriately or not.
All right, well, let's just talk about general systems then. In the evening, let's say a patient needs to be checked every 10 minutes. Is that through a window, or do you physically enter the room, talk to the patient, or cite the patient?
So if the patient is on hourly checks and they are seen face-to-face every hourly, if they are on more regular checks, then the patient is normally spoken to. But, of course, if the patient is asleep, they're not woken up for the checks.
Okay, so not woken up, but if a patient was asleep of an evening, would you go into the room? Or would you check them through a window, is what I'm trying to establish?
Okay, so both may happen. The patient may be checked through a window, or the patient
Even a high-risk patient would be checked through a window?
As I was saying, they may be checked through a window, or then the staff nurse may go into the room to do the checks. It depends upon the risk involved. And also, you have to understand that it is quite intrusive. Someone coming into your room and disturbing you every 10 minutes. Patients have a right to dignity and care like all of us. They're not different from us. And it's very intrusive to wake someone up every 10 minutes to talk to them.
So it's obviously a balance between privacy and preserving life, though.
It is always a balance between privacy and dignity. And keeping a safe eye on what is happening on the ward.
So, do you know if you had a full complement of staff on at the times these deaths occurred?
At this point, I can't answer that question.
Because you don't know, or you don't wish to?
Because that is something for the review to look at.
It is an incredibly serious issue and of extreme public interest, and these are not questions that pry into someone's privacy. Staffing levels, were you at full staffing capacity when these two patients died?
Again, what I would say is that all of these things will be looked at by the inquiry. I think that it is important that we have been very transparent about this. I know from my experience in patient safety, and I've worked in patient safety for 15 years, that transparency is key. And that for that reason, we have invited 2 senior clinicians from outside of the organisation to come in and do a comprehensive, thorough review.
And I understand that, but Dr. Cleary, families who have entrusted their loved ones to you right now, who may be in that unit too, they will want to know that they can trust the level of care that you are giving. How can they have any confidence in you and that unit?
And I understand that, and we have spoken to all of the patients on the unit, and we have spoken to their families, and have explained to them what has happened and what we are doing, and what we're doing to make sure that we have reduced the risk. We have ensured that there is appropriate staff in place and that they have the right senior support. And we've had psychological counsellors come in and talking to the patients and staff on the unit.
So how many more staff than usual have you boosted numbers to?
We have boosted numbers appropriately for the unit at this point in time. And obviously...
And what's that?
And that is, we have assessed the risk of the patients on the ward, and we have added the number of staff that we feel is appropriate.
You have had issues with staff shortages before. Beds have been closed down in 2017 and 2016. So, can you tell us how many more staff you've brought on?
I cannot tell you how many staff we brought on. I am confident that we have brought on the right number of staff appropriate to the risk situation that we're facing at the moment.
And again, did you have the right number of staff on at the time these 2 people died?
And again, I would say that is something for the review to look at.
All right, I thank you for joining us this evening. That is Dr. Kevin Cleary, who's the Acting Director of Mental Health Services at Waitemata DHB. And while we've been talking, there has been some breaking news just to hand. It has been confirmed Wallabies superstar Israel Folau has had his 4-year, $4 million contract with Rugby Australia terminated because of his controversial social media posts. A 3-person independent panel has just announced its verdict 10 days after deciding Folau had committed a high-level breach of Rugby Australia's Professional Players Code of Conduct. The Wallabies' only 3 times Player of the Year and Super Rugby's all-time leading try scorer has 72 hours to appeal and force the governing body into proceeding with a second Code of Conduct hearing. Next, a tale of 2 children, both are 4 years old, both suffering a rare degenerative disorder which slowly eats away at their muscles and limits their mobility. But the 2 children live in different countries, one in Australia, the other here in New Zealand, and that means their lives are vastly different. One has access to a life-changing but expensive drug which has seen them go from strength to strength over the past 12 months. The other, living in Waikato, is slowly losing muscle movement and has recently been fitted for a power wheelchair. Kiwi parents say denying children the drugs here is denying them a chance at life, and Pharmac needs to act immediately to make them available. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Dom Thomas have the story.
Lincoln Woodmass and Ivy Old have massive smiles on their wee faces as they bounce on this backyard trampoline. Lincoln and Ivy are both 4 years old, and in many ways they've had parallel Kiwi childhoods, both clever, bubbly and lovely kids, even born just 1 day apart. They also both have spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, a childhood version of motor neuron disease which causes muscles to waste away, leaving those affected with limited mobility. Ivy's parents, Belinda and Gavin, had never heard of the rare condition before.
Ivy sort of just started falling away from her peers at around 11 months. We just noticed that she wasn't moving the same, needing a lot of effort to get up and just kind of observing life rather than participating.
It was a similar story for Lincoln's parents, Tanya and Regan.
Lincoln reached every milestone before time. Even he was advanced, yeah. Yeah, he crawled before time, he walked before time, like he did everything well before time, just like his brother and sister did. And so we had no idea until the daycare brought it to our attention and said something wasn't quite right.
Both children were diagnosed with the genetic condition around the time they turned 2.
But Lincoln and Ivy are both 4. Lincoln was born the day after Ivy, and then he was diagnosed the day after Ivy. So we knew of this little person who was going through the same thing as us.
But the impact SMA will have on the children's respective lives is vastly different.
Really, up until we started treatment, there was a sort of a parallel, in that we've got 2 children with SMA type 3 and both will experience a decline, and who knows when that will start and how severe that will be and how quickly. Now all of a sudden our lives have gone on a complete tangent. We've got Ivy who's getting stronger. We see many miracles in every day. And then there's Lincoln's family who will be experiencing him getting weaker over time, and there'll be a point where Ivy's abilities will overtake Lincoln's, and that's, for Lincoln's family, devastating.
That's because Ivy has been able to access the life-changing drug Spinraza. Spinraza is available in 50 countries around the world, including Australia, where Ivy and her family moved 12 months ago to access it. Belinda Old is Australian, and her girls, who both have SMA, have dual citizenship. Back across the ditch, they're thriving.
Since getting treatment, everything's changed.
Her personal best now for walking 7 times what it was before treatment. She kicks and kicks and kicks like a little mermaid and can keep up with all of the children in her swimming class, so she's progressing like every other child. She can climb up onto the table, she can toilet herself independently, she climbs in and out of the bath like any other child.
The Olds were back in New Zealand this week visiting family and celebrating the 1-year anniversary of accessing Spinraza in Australia. Catching up with their wider SMA family, including Lincoln, is bittersweet.
We feel like so fortunate to have this opportunity. We're so lucky that our girls are the ones.
Yeah.
But then we feel so guilty that there's children here that we've met who aren't having these opportunities, and it's heartbreaking. And I don't feel like we can ever truly celebrate wholeheartedly until these children get treatment.
Lincoln's parents, Tanya and Regan, are ecstatic about how well Ivy and her sister Olive are doing, but say it highlights the awful situation they face here, where Spinraza isn't funded.
It brings a tear to my eye just seeing that, from little girls that, were worse than Lincoln is now, to be able to walk around and their own steam is just fantastic. That's excellent. What the hell do we have to do to get that same sort of treatment? That's, of course we'll do what we have to do to make it happen.
Spinraza is the only treatment out there for SMA, and users say it's something of a wonder drug. It halts muscle deterioration and can also bring back lost mobility. It has the greatest impact if used as early as possible, and Lincoln's dad Regan says they're racing against time.
We're at a crossroads for Linky. Like I said, he's being sized up for his power chair, but if we somehow manage to, get him Spinraza, we could halt it there, maybe get some gains, and that would be everything. It's a horrible disease. It robs you of your ability to do all the cool things in life.
Tanya's seen the effect SMA has and is terrified for her son.
But people with SMA are highly intelligent, so they know what's going on. They just can't do anything about it.
It's trapped inside their own body, really.
Yeah. They've had scoliosis, their lungs have collapsed, they have difficulty eating, breathing, swallowing. They can't hold their own heads up. It scares the living daylights out of me to think about what could be.
There are 4 different types of SMA. Lincoln and Ivy both have type 3, putting them at the milder end of the spectrum. Babies with type 1 aren't expected to live more than 18 months. Here in New Zealand, fewer than 100 people have the condition, and this month they work to get more than 15,000 people to sign a petition calling on Pharmac to fund Spinraza. Earlier this year, Pharmac deferred a decision on funding the drug for under 18-year-olds because it is awaiting further evidence. Tanya Woodmath says other countries haven't needed to wait.
Why won't you give our child and every other sufferer a chance to access Spinraza? Why are you saying you need more evidence when it is given in over 50 different countries to 7,500 people? Why do you say you need more clinical evidence? That's a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
Overseas estimates put the cost of Spinraza at around $1 million per person per year. But Gavin Old says that's a totally arbitrary figure, as Pharmac hasn't engaged in any price negotiations.
And the $1 million is for the first year in America, so completely different space over there. The insurance companies pay for their medication in America. Our understanding is that drug companies launch there first, and then as they sprawl out to other countries, the price gets negotiated and comes down. So sometimes decisions can't be purely done on a cost-benefit analysis. Ethically, these children have rights.
Pharmac says it's in regular contact with Spinraza's supplier, and if they get more evidence from them before their next subcommittee meeting in September, it could be assessed then. But Tanya Woodmass says time is not on their side.
Warms our hearts to see the impact Spinraza has had, and it makes, at the same time, it makes your heart hurt because it makes you want to fight 10 times harder knowing how well this treatment is doing.
It's there, it works.
Yeah. We've seen it firsthand, what it can do, and we want it.
The Woodmass and the Old family say denying children access to Spinraza is denying them a chance to live. And as they watch SMA children in Australia go from strength to strength, it's also strengthening their resolve to get the drug to New Zealanders as soon as possible. And while they wait, Lincoln's family can only hope that their story will also have a happy ending.
Definitely have hope. Definitely have hope.
Without hope we'll have nothing.
We have hope for our son.
And it is 26 minutes after 5. Do check out that story, which will be on our webpage later in the evening. As I said, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. As always, you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A beneficiary says the stress of a years-long MSD fraud investigation drove her to attempt suicide and has ruined her life, even though she was cleared in an independent review of her case, where the evidence against her was rejected as speculation and highly unreliable. A report yesterday from the Privacy Commissioner found some MSD investigations into alleged fraud have been intrusive, excessive and even illegal. The woman, who we can't name for legal reasons, was accused of committing benefit fraud by being in a relationship that would affect the amount of money she was entitled to. The man she was accused of having an intimate relationship with was her boarder, who is gay. She is speaking out for the first time because she says she doesn't want anyone else to experience the hell that she did. Her voice has been altered to protect her identity.
There was a malicious complaint from my neighbour. And she rang them and said that I was in a relationship as of marriage with my boarder. But what she didn't know is my boarder was gay.
And what did that unleash on you, someone making that allegation?
Oh, they were just really, really nasty neighbours, so I really wasn't surprised, but it was totally horrendous.
In what way? What happened from that point onwards?
I received a phone call out of the blue. It's explained to me. I'm asked if I will answer some questions on the phone, which I did. And then they say that they'll send me these papers to fill out. When they arrived, it was so many papers, and I saw on there that you could ring them and they could get it themselves. So I told them to get everything themselves. And he said that within 4 to 6 weeks, 1 or 2 people would be round to talk to me.
And what happened?
They didn't turn up. They didn't consider the impact on my mental health, although I advised them up front that I had a mental illness. So when nobody turned up, it was probably nearly a year later that I got a phone call from my friends to say that these 2 investigators were going around all the people I knew and around the neighbourhood, telling them that I was being investigated for a relationship. And they rang me to tell me that they were doing it. I knew nothing about it till then.
What effect did that have on your mental health?
Just horrendous. Just horrendous. It had a horrendous impact on me. Still does to this day. I attempted suicide numerous times because of the stress. They just wouldn't believe my explanations and seemed to have already made up their minds. Just sheer hell.
What was your explanation to them? What did you tell them?
That I wasn't in a relationship as of marriage. And when they looked at things, bank accounts and everything like that, there was absolutely nothing there. My boarder told them he was gay. The investigator even went along and said that, oh no, I didn't hear him say that. Well, it was there in his interview. It was there in the first benefit review committee. I just cannot get over the lies in the paperwork, saying I didn't do this when I did. It was just horrendous. And in the end, I've always had an awesome GP, but I then had a psychologist plus a psychiatrist, which I'd had in the past, but I hadn't needed them. And I just couldn't cope anymore. It was the delays. We'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Well, after 8 months, I rang a lawyer. Do you know what it's like to be stressed for 8 months not knowing what's going on? All this took 5 years.
Do you think they went over the top with the level of investigation, given what the allegation was?
Oh, hell yes. And they would have known earlier on that it was rubbish. I do have a feeling there were 2 lady investigators to start with. I believe the one who carried on, this was her first case. She was just new. I believe she had something to prove.
So you went to have your case reviewed, didn't you? And what was the outcome of that?
Oh, just 150% win. So much so that I was told, I believe it's never happened before, but the committee made the decision that the appeal stood even before the lawyers had their summing up. So, and then in the 36 pages report they did, they told MSD you had the evidence right in front of you and you chose not to use it.
The committee that reviewed your case, they agreed that you were not in a relationship?
Yes, definitely.
What effect did it have on the boarder?
Just, nobody knew, no family knew, so he actually had to tell his family. So it's brought him out when before it was all hidden. Only I think his sister and I knew about it.
So he was forced to disclose private information about himself when he may not have been ready?
Yes. Yes. But I feel so bad. He's such a lovely, kind person, very quiet. And it's devastating. That's all I'm going to say. The ones who are doing fraud, yeah, sure, get them. But what I went through, and I honestly think between the lawyers and the MSD, because of my mental illness, I really think they thought this was a pushover.
This almost cost you your life.
5 times.
5 times?
Yep.
What about now? How are you doing now?
I just can't get over it. It's like my psychiatrist said, there's a part in your brain that stress and trauma so deep over 5 or so years that it'll be years before that part mends itself, if it ever does. So I've lost my life. I used to be a fun, full of life, funny person. Now I just don't even want to go out. I really find each day hard to cope. Just messed up my life.
And as mentioned, the independent review of the woman's case found that she had never been in a relationship in the nature of a marriage with the man, as MSD had alleged. And MSD was ordered to scrap the tens of thousands of dollars it said the woman owed in repayments. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to the headlines now with Susanna Leotawa.
The Waitemata DHB says it has made changes at its Hepuna Waiora inpatient unit where 2 people died in the space of 5 days. An independent external review is underway into how the patients died. The DHB's Acting Director of Mental Health Services, Kevin Cleary, says they made immediate changes after the first death, increasing staffing and removing bathroom doors. An independent review has been ordered into the unit. The former owner of Alpine Adventures has been fined $64,000 over a helicopter crash which killed 7 people on Fox Glacier in 2015. James Patrick Scott and the company in charge of training, Aviation Manual Development Limited, had pleaded guilty to breaches of the Health and Safety and Employment Act and were sentenced in the Christchurch District Court this afternoon. The training company was found to have no assets, so it avoided a fine. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has not yet released its report on the crash. Rugby Australia has confirmed it has sacked Wallaby Israel Folau over his controversial media posts. The Chief Executive, Raylene Castle, says Folau, through his actions, left them no choice. The Wallabies' 62-test superstar will have 72 hours to appeal and force a second code of conduct hearing. Oranga Tamariki says it is investigating a claim that one of its staff dropped a teenage boy off at a gang pad as punishment for being too cheeky. A Hastings man, DJ Brian, posted a video on Facebook yesterday of himself with the boy, saying he had been left at the pad by a social worker. The local MP for Ikaroa Rāwhiti, Meka Whaitiri, says Oranga Tamariki needs to work more closely with the community. The Perth father of one of 8 tourists killed by a Rwandan militia in Uganda 20 years ago is devastated to learn that 2 men accused of the murders were resettled in Australia without his knowledge. It was revealed yesterday that the 2 Rwandans were resettled in Australia as part of a refugee swap deal with the United States. 2 New Zealanders were among those killed in the attack, along with David Roberts' son, Stephen. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. You're listening to Checkpoint. Business is up soon, but let's build a little bit of suspense by going to Australia first. Tomorrow, Australians will go to the polls and they'll be hoping whoever wins, it will stop the revolving door of prime ministers. There have been 6 in the past 12 years. Voters will decide whether the Liberal National Coalition, led by Prime Minister Scott Morrison, or Bill Shorten's Labour Party will lead the nation for the next 3 years. The last major opinion poll has the Labour Party ahead by a very narrow margin, 51 to 49. On the final day of campaigning, the major parties are throwing their efforts at marginal seats, but the day has been overshadowed by the death of former Prime Minister Bob Hawke. Here's the ABC's Melissa Clark.
It's nearly over.
This will be the closest election I think we've seen in many, many years.
After 5 weeks on the campaign trail, the Prime Minister is feeling buoyant.
I mean, I don't think anyone who has been following me around the country for these last 5 weeks ago, thought this is where the election would be the day before.
And he's got his message refined.
Just don't vote Labor. Just don't vote Labor.
But for his positivity, victory is a tall order for the coalition. Scott Morrison is in the electorate of Leichhardt in far north Queensland. It's a seat the Liberals' Warren Entsch holds by 3.9%. And it's getting a prime ministerial visit on election eve because it's one of a swathe of regional Queensland seats that could determine the outcome of the election.
That I take nothing for granted anywhere in the country.
The nationwide polls are tight and the seat-by-seat contests hard to predict. The campaign has hit a frenetic pace, with politicians hitting the airwaves. Labor's Deputy Leader, Tanya Plibersek, is pushing the opposition's message of change.
I'm playing to win. I think all of my Labor colleagues are doing their very best over this last day to convince people that if they want change in our nation, then they have to vote Labor.
Speaking on RN Breakfast, she cautioned those dissatisfied with the state of politics against straying too far from the major parties.
I would really urge people to not to muck around with independence.
With a tight contest and independents challenging Labor and the coalition in several seats, a hung parliament is possible.
I mean, I see Labor is talking about minority governments now.
Even though Scott Morrison has governed in minority as Prime Minister, he says if Labor were to form a minority government after Saturday, it wouldn't have a mandate for change.
What that does mean is Bill Shorten would not have been able I've convinced Australians about what he's been saying.
The final day of Labor's campaign has been tinged with sadness by the death of Australia's 23rd Prime Minister and favourite son of the Labor Party, Bob Hawke. Bill Shorten met with him just last week.
And all he wanted to do was talk about politics and how the election's going and his hopes for what we could do. And he in fact told me that he and Blanche had arranged a bit of a party for Saturday night to watch the election count. Of course, he won't be able to do that from there, but from wherever he is, hopefully he'll be looking down.
His death marked a unifying moment on the campaign trail. Scott Morrison paid tribute.
Well, he was a unifier, I think, and but his appeal was directly, I think, to the hearts and minds of each and every Australian, and he had ability to carry Australians with him because he understood them.
Former Liberal Prime Minister John Howard said he was a man of authority.
He was the best Prime Minister of the Labor movement in Australia's history. I would rank him at the top of the list so far as Labor Prime Ministers were concerned.
But the political leader who transformed the nation and the economy is also having an impact on this election. Bill Shorten is hoping to emulate Bob Hawke's ability to find consensus between workers and employers. And Labor is happy to remind voters of the legacy of the Hawke government: economic transformation, environmental protection and the introduction of Medicare.
That was Melissa Clark reporting Time for Business now. Nona Palcios joined me in the studio. Nona, infrastructure investment company Infratel, that's quite hard to say, isn't it? They've posted a loss, but they still reckon they're in a strong position.
Well, they signalled they would make a loss. They made a $19.5 million loss. That's because they made a very large incentive payment for extraordinarily good management of their international investments, which cost the company $102.6 million, which they'd flagged earlier. Otherwise, their underlying profit was pretty strong. It was up 20%. And they're going to need that money because they're the company that's going to buy Vodafone with their Canadian partner Brookfield. Now, I can't tell you how the market reacted to this result because they're in a trading halt as they're raising $400 million towards the purchase of Vodafone for $3.4 billion.
Yeah,
that's
a lot
right.
of zeros.
So anyways, our top 50 index hit to rose 4 points to a record 10,181, Lisa. Just the 4 points up, though. And the New Zealand dollar is trading. It's fairly steady at 65.4. Stronger against the Australian because it's been slipping. 94.9 Australian and 51.1 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Have a wonderful weekend. Nona Palcios with your business wrap-up there. And it is about 17 minutes. I've lost the ability to tell the time. It is Friday. About 17 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, residents who raised serious safety concerns about a South Auckland social housing complex believe the complex operators are now trying to silence them, and they say they feel bullied. The Papatoetoe complex is run by the New Zealand arm of the Australian not-for-profit Compass, which has received more than $3.3 million in government subsidies since 2016. Earlier this month, a number of tenants told Checkpoint they didn't feel secure in their homes anymore because of alleged assaults, sexual harassment and ongoing antisocial behaviour on site. And they want Compass to do more to provide a safe living environment. Since then, Compass has offered the tenants mediation with a company it has hired, but only if the tenants participating sign a legally binding confidentiality agreement that effectively silences them. Today, the tenants met with Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni to express their concerns about Compass's management and their tactics.
They've wanted us to go to a private mediation and pretty much a gag order put on us. We postponed it. It was supposed to be Wednesday. We postponed it because we wanted to see Carmel Sepuloni today. And if we'd gone to that, we would have had to have signed confidentiality agreement, so we wouldn't be able to talk freely with her.
Compass residents Debbie and Len are fresh out of a meeting to discuss what they believe are rotten tactics. We met them a few weeks back when, frustrated at what they see as a lack of action from social housing managers Compass, they went public with allegations about what's been going on at the property Compass manages. Here's a refresher.
We had to call police at 7 o'clock tonight. Had a house full all day drinking, little baby in the room, called noise control, November 2017. Really upset visitors were drinking and smoking marijuana all night. There's a new guy assaulted his girlfriend, saying he was going to slit my throat.
Are you a whinger?
No, I just want a safe, secure place to live in.
Compass responded, offering mediation with a private company it had hired and with a rider. They would have to sign a confidentiality agreement and not speak about it. They've decided against silence.
Threatened that if we didn't attend the mediation that we would be charged for it. As you know, we're beneficiaries, it's a lot of money. The fact that we had to sign confidentiality agreements, which meant we couldn't talk to you any longer.
So they wanted you to sign what was effectively a gag order?
Yeah, correct. So we couldn't continue the complaints any further. This is what's forced us to seek the Minister's assistance in this, because we think they're breaching the contract that they have with the New Zealand Government to supply safe and secure housing.
What did you make of the confidentiality agreement, Debbie? The fact that they wanted you to sign up, to not speak publicly, to not talk to me?
It was to keep my mouth shut.
Are some of the other people scared to come out and make complaints?
Very scared, and I think they think that they will lose their tenancy if they speak out.
So, in a nutshell, you've got serious concerns about safety and well-being in that complex, have you, Debbie? Can you just remind us?
Very much. The safety, I've been threatened. I was physically assaulted Sunday before last. I've not even had management ask how I am. When I asked them what they were doing about it, I was told it was a privacy thing. And I thought, well, how can it be private when it's about me? What are they going to do to help me?
Len, what concerns did you raise with the Minister?
The fact that we've been asked to sign a gag order, effectively a gag order, the disability access for myself, also the behavioural problems and the lack of management that Compass has shown. Since I've taken on full management of the property, we never see them. They don't answer complaints. They've since told us that they're no longer going to be accepting texts or emails. It's only going to be by landline, which makes it very difficult for beneficiaries who are on prepaid phones to ring a landline.
So that's the only way that they will take complaints from you now, via landline?
Via landline, this is what we were told, yes.
What do you hope comes from this? What do you want at the end of the day?
I want a safe and secure place to live. I don't want to be scared that I'm going to get threatened or I'm going to get physically assaulted. I just want to be safe. I'm at an age now, well, why shouldn't I be safe? Why shouldn't that be the minimum that they can offer me?
Len, these contracts that they gave to you ahead of mediation that they wanted you to sign, where did that leave you? Because as you mentioned, you're beneficiaries, so were you able to get legal advice? I mean, how did you...
Not in the time frame. They basically notified us by text on a Tuesday. Then I asked them for these documents, so I had time to get them perused. They had turned up 5 o'clock on a Thursday, which only left us Friday. Because we need to seek legal advice from the likes of Citizens Advice, it's not always possible.
Did you feel there was a bit of an imbalance in the positions there?
I think the time frame was unreasonable, the way they've gone about it. And basically, we never declined mediation. We asked for a delay in order to seek legal advice on it, because I don't feel comfortable being told to shut up. And this is why we've come to the Minister today. She's given us assurance that she'll be in touch with the Minister of Housing, and also for him to look at what their contractual obligations are towards us as tenants and New Zealand taxpayers.
Ultimately, what do you want out of this?
I would like the government to look into whether they are living up to their legal obligations in New Zealand. We all have the right to a peaceful life and a quiet life. We are not receiving that. If anything, we've been treated like second-class citizens. And at the moment I'm feeling bullied. I'm concerned about mental health issues that are raising their head on quite a regular basis because they're not responding to complaints. My complaints have been going on for 18 months now, and I still have not had resolution or even a discussion with Compass about what they are doing about it. Every time I raise the issue, I'm getting told it's none of my business, even though I'm the one that's been assaulted or threatened. And it's just not good enough as far as I'm concerned. So I would like to see them held to task.
Now, while we were talking to Debbie and Len, Social Development Minister and Kelston MP Carmel Sepuloni came out to join the conversation. Ms Sepuloni says she's already spoken to Housing Minister Phil Twyford about complaints around Compass, and Len and Debbie are not the only people to raise concerns with her about the provider. I took the opportunity to ask the Minister about the Privacy Commissioner's scathing report into MSD2. Now, that's the one that found some ministry investigations into alleged benefit fraud had been intrusive, excessive and even illegal. But first, the issue of social housing managers' compass. Do you have concerns?
Oh, look, I think that the concerns that have been raised are concerns that need to be listened to. There's concerns from the Residents Association as well. I was at a meeting with them on Saturday morning.
About these residences?
With regards to the residences, and so, you know, that's stuff to work through. I've already contacted our Minister of Housing, Phil Twyford, on this. He's agreed that actually that these concerns need to be listened to and that MHUD should be involved in those conversations. So as a local MP, you know, that's something that I'm already actively involved in.
What concerns did the Residents Association raise?
Oh, a range of different things, and so that's probably a question that you should put to them. But for now, you know, it's about having constructive conversations to make sure that we all are aware of the facts, because I think that's the other thing as well, and to find a way moving forward, because, you know, we need the accommodation. We need to make sure that it is suitable, that it is appropriate, and that if there are tenants' concerns, that they are addressed.
How appropriate is it for a social housing provider to ask tenants to effectively sign a gag order in order to get their grievances heard at mediation?
Look, that was an issue that was raised with me just today, and so that's something that I said I'd look into.
Do you think it's appropriate?
That's definitely something I'll be looking into.
And how will you approach Compass? What do you plan to do?
Oh, look, I've already talked to the residents that have the concerns, and so we're going to work together to make sure that we express our concerns very clearly in a letter and then find out what the appropriate process would be.
Minister, while I've got you, do you think that you have any obligation to apologise to beneficiaries who may have had their lives intruded on during MSD investigations?
Lisa, that's not what we're here to talk about today, and in fact I think you've already been given a heads up that I'm happy to comment on that after the reviews come back.
It's a really significant issue though. Do you not feel that those people deserve a response?
I've made it really clear that what might have been acceptable under the previous government is not acceptable under ours. And so there will be a review of the code, and we will look to make changes that are appropriate and in line with this government.
Do beneficiaries deserve an apology? Those that were not found to have committed fraud but were, exposed to really intrusive practices?
Lisa, as I said, what was acceptable under the previous government is not acceptable under our government, and give me a chance to actually review those processes.
But it did happen on your watch as well. It might not have been your policy, but it continued under this government's watch.
It was a policy that was implemented under the previous government. Our role is to fix it, and I can assure you and the general public that that will be something that we do.
Do you think it's worth looking into compensation for stress caused?
Lisa, I'm not going to keep talking about this because that was not what we agreed to talk about here. Thank you.
What about the top two jobs in MSD? Should they resign, Minister, just before you head off?
Lisa, we won't be talking about that right now. Thank you. But see you later, Len. Thanks, Jibby.
Bye-bye.
And that was Carmel Sepuloni there. And we did ask Compass some questions about the issues raised by the tenants. They say that confidentiality agreements are standard as part of the mediation process and apply equally to all parties. Mediation is voluntary, they say, and that in this instance the parties have agreed to participate in mediation. They say that they're going with a private mediator because accessing the government mediation service can involve a long waiting period, and they say they entered into this process in good faith to resolve the matter as soon as possible. They also say that they are still accepting complaints from tenants via text and email, and that they're providing all tenants in New Zealand with free Wi-Fi in order that they can use that to contact them. You're with Checkpoint. Do send us your feedback, 2101. And let's go to Australia now. Rugby Australia has terminated fullback Israel Folau's contract for committing a high-level breach of the Players' Code of Conduct by sharing a social media post. A three-person independent panel has announced its verdict 10 days after deciding Folau had committed a high-level breach of Rugby Australia's Professional Players' Code of Conduct. Rugby Australia CEO Raylene Castle told reporters in Sydney that the outcome is painful for the game.
While Rugby Australia accepts the panel's decision directing termination of Israel Folau's playing contract for his high-level breach of the Code of Conduct, we want to stress that this outcome is a painful situation for the game. Rugby Australia did not choose to be in this situation, but Rugby Australia's position remains that Israel, through his actions, left us with no choice but to pursue the course of action resulting in today's outcome. There's been an extremely challenging period for rugby, and this issue has created an unwanted distraction in an important year for the sport and for the Wallabies team. But our clear message to all rugby fans today is that we need to stand by our values and the qualities of inclusion, passion, integrity, discipline, respect and teamwork.
And sports reporter Clay Wilson has been following this story, and he joins me now in the studio. Hi, Clay.
Sure, Lisa.
Was this the kind of inevitable outcome?
Well, the longer this dragged on, you perhaps thought that maybe we might get a different decision, but since he was found guilty last week, it has seemed inevitable that this was the decision they were going to reach. Rugby Australia's opinion on it, their view on it has been fairly strong since the start. So to get rid of him, to tear up his contract, it was always sort of heading this way since he was found guilty. It was going to take a lot for the three-person panel to turn around and say that perhaps that wasn't the best course of action. I think everyone who's across this generally expected that he was going to have his contract ripped up.
So is that it? Line in the sand, drawn, no more about this, or is there more to play out here?
No, this situation's obviously dragged on for weeks and it could drag on for longer. Reports out of Australia suggesting that Israel Folau will appeal, and not appeal to go back to a second code of conduct hearing, but to appeal to go to Australia's Supreme Court, so the highest court in the land. I think he really wants to make this about freedom of religious expression, and that's at any financial cost. Of course, his contract in the region reported $4 million. So in terms of the money he's losing out on, obviously that's not the big thing for him. He really wants to try and make a stand on this for, I guess, future generations and people of faith, that they're allowed to come out and say these things which are written in the Bible, and that they shouldn't be able to be punished for it by their employers. So
now that we've got the decision, are we expecting any pushback on either side around it?
Well, we saw from some of the Pacific players that there was talk about a player revolt, because some of the Pacific players who are also, well, a lot of them, of course, are of Christian faith, weren't that happy about the way the Rugby Australia were approaching the situation. But Raelene Castle did come out today in the press conference and said she had touched base with all the players, and they think they've smoothed over that. But I think we've seen on social media as well, a lot of people, especially a lot of people obviously of faith, not that happy with the way this has been portrayed. So whether we see some backlash in that sense, but I don't think in terms of Folau there's any way he's going to get back into the game. It appears his days in rugby are well and truly done.
So we heard from Raelene Castle there, no word from Israel Folau as yet?
No, nothing from Folau.
And what does this do for the Wallabies' prospects for the World Cup?
Well, it's a huge blow for the Wallabies. Arguably, he's their best player, definitely their most dangerous attacking weapon. They have others, but we've seen what Israel Folau has done against the All Blacks. All Blacks fans will remember that. So it really is a big blow for not only for the Wallabies World Cup chances, but for rugby in Australia in general. It's already in a massive fight and a real struggle against the other major codes, rugby league and cricket and Aussie rules in Australia. So this is only going to worsen that situation in terms of the look for rugby. But yeah, their World Cup chances definitely take a huge blow, losing a world-class player like Israel Folau.
Thanks for that. That's Clay Wilson, who's been following the Israel Folau case, and as you heard there, that's it. He's gone. Contract over, but we're expecting it to drag on somewhat, potentially through the courts if he challenges it. And let's get to some of your feedback now. We've got a bit of time for that. Oh, I've just been handed a new piece by Susanna, who's standing by to read us the news shortly. So this is in respect of the story that Nita Blake-Person brought us earlier in the program about two children who are the same age, both 4 years old. They both suffer from the same degenerative disorder. One lives in Australia, though, and one lives here in New Zealand. The one in Australia gets drugs that cost a significant amount of money, not so here in New Zealand. This one in from Helen. Helen says, why is this country so behind our international cohorts regarding treatments like that for SMA? Just look at the parliamentary website at the moment. Drugs for advanced breast cancer, leukemia, multiple myeloma and lung cancer all have petitions begging for life-saving or life-extending access to medications that have been standard offshore for many years. It's appalling hearing people having to leave New Zealand just to survive or to thrive. Not good enough, says Helen. This texter says perhaps the $200 million saved on free university fees or some of the provincial growth fund money could help those families access the drugs they need. Every government has choices. I question the ones that this government is making at times. Oh, and some feedback from Angela. This is in respect to the interview that I did with a beneficiary who was investigated over a number of years by MSD. This was because they alleged that she was in a relationship with a man and it would affect her benefit. She wasn't. I feel outraged hearing the interview with the poor woman persecuted by MSD. I wish her all the best for the future and hope that she can move past her dreadful treatment. As a taxpayer, I'm also outraged that our taxes were used to pay for the investigation. News time now.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Waitemata District Health Board says it has made immediate changes at its He Puna Waiora inpatient unit after 2 people died in the space of 5 days. An independent external review is underway into how the 2 patients died. The Acting Director of Mental Health Services, Dr Kevin Cleary, says the DHB made changes after the first death, increasing staffing and removing bathroom doors. He says the unit needs to be made as safe as possible.
This unit, He Puna Waiora, has been open for 4 years now, and in those 4 years up until this week, we've had no inpatient suicides, so we've had hundreds of patients successfully treated in the unit.
Dr Cleary says this kind of event should never have happened in an inpatient unit. Both deaths will go through coronial investigations. A man has died in South Auckland after a shooting. Police were called to Piako Street in Otara just before 3 p.m. They found a man with a gunshot wound when they arrived, and he had died at the scene. Cordons are in place on Piako Street and they're expected to be there for some time while a scene examination takes place. The police say this is a serious and tragic incident. They want anyone with any information to contact them. The MP for Ikaroa Rāwhiti, Meka Whaitiri, says it's concerning that Oranga Tamariki is being called into question over another incident in Hawke's Bay. A Hastings man, DJ Bryan, claims the ministry dropped a teenager boy off at a gang pad. The claim was made in a video he posted yesterday. It comes just over a week after a standoff at Hawke's Bay Hospital when social workers tried to take a newborn baby against the mother and midwife's wishes. Meka Whaitiri says something's not right here and the ministry needs to work more closely with the community.
I've heard enough from midwives back home, from iwi chairs, from those that work in the sort of social area to say we can do better here, He Oranga Tamariki, and they're putting their hand up to be part of the solution.
Meka Whaitiri. Oranga Tamariki says it is looking into the claims. The Wallaby star Israel Folau has had his 4-year, $4 million contract with Rugby Australia terminated because of his controversial social media posts about homosexuals and other so-called sinners he believes are destined for hell. An independent panel announced its verdict today after last week deciding Folau had committed a high-level breach of Rugby Australia's Professional Players Code of Conduct. Rugby Australia Chief Executive Raylene Castle says Folau left them with no alternative but to terminate his contract.
This outcome is a painful situation for the game. Rugby Australia did not choose to be in this situation, but Rugby Australia's position remains that Israel, through his actions, left us with no choice but to pursue the course of action resulting in today's outcome.
Israel Folau has 72 hours to appeal the decision. Fines have been handed down in the Christchurch District Court over one of the country's worst helicopter crashes in recent times. All 7 of those on board the single-engine Squirrel helicopter died when it plunged into a deep crevice on Fox Glacier in 2015. They included 28-year-old pilot Mitch Gammeren and 6 tourists. The then owner of Queenstown-based Alpine Adventures, James Patrick Scott, and the company in charge of ensuring training was up to scratch, Aviation Manual Development Limited, owned by Barry Waterland, had already pleaded guilty to breaches of the Health and Safety and Employment Act. Today, James Scott was fined $64,000. Barry Waterland's company was found to have no assets and so avoided a fine. The country's biggest bank, ANZ, has been censured by the Reserve Bank and made to hold a lot more money in reserve. That's money it may need to cover any shortfalls or losses in the case of a financial crisis. Business reporter Madison Reedy has more.
The Reserve Bank is forcing ANZ to increase the amount it keeps in reserve by $277 million, an increase of 60%. The central bank says the ANZ didn't follow the rules and has been holding too little in reserve for the past 5 years. The ANZ and the other big trading banks calculate how much they need to set aside according to their risks and with the Reserve Bank's approval. But the Reserve Bank says ANZ didn't have approval for the calculations it used and so will have to use a prescribed method instead. ANZ says it's disappointed by its mistake but accepts it will have to widen its safety net. This is Madison Reedy.
It's 5 minutes past 6. The Warriors coach Stephen Kearney is under no illusions that one win doesn't represent a turnaround. After a tough month, the Warriors snapped a 4-game National Rugby League losing streak in a come-from-behind 26-18 win over St George Illawarra last weekend, and they're desperate to back that up tonight against the Panthers in Penrith. Kearney says it's too early to say if they've turned the corner.
When you talk about turning points, you know, this competition, reality is you got to turn up again next week. You know, there's no gifts in this competition. You know, you got to work really hard for for anything.
Stephen Kearney. The New Zealand golfer Danny Lee is just one shot off the lead after the first round of the second major of the year, the PGA Championship. Lee carded a 6-under 64 at Bethpage Black in New York, mixing 8 birdies with 2 bogeys. He's one shot behind defending champion American Brooks Koepka, who shot a course record equalling 63. The Black Caps wicket-keeper Tom Latham could miss the early matches at the Cricket World Cup after suffering a finger injury. Latham has fractured the middle finger of his left hand, an injury he suffered while keeping for the New Zealand 11 against Australia in a warm match in Brisbane last week. Nelson cyclist George Bennett is 8th overall after the 5th stage of the Tour of California, a race he won in 2017. Yesterday he had initially moved up to 6th in the standings, but a subsequent appeal not involving him nullified the results on stage 4. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, you know you're getting old when the music magazine Rip It Up joins the National Library's Papers Past website. The ageless Murray Cammack and Chris Burke play some musical highlights. Douglas Copeland, Canadian writer and artist, is old enough to remember his pre-internet brain. It was pretty good if he recalls correctly. And how do dogs remember? Ken Ramirez can teach them to count. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, a few showers north of Auckland. Clearing today, a few showers developing tomorrow, mainly in the west. Waitomo to Manawatu, including central high country. Mainly fine, a few showers developing tomorrow morning, becoming more frequent tomorrow night. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few coastal showers. Clearing today, then fine weather tomorrow. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from a few showers about the western ranges of Nelson. Bulla and Westland, fine today, rain or showers tomorrow. Otago, excluding Clutha, fine but a few showers about the lakes tomorrow. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, fine today, showers developing in Fiordland and Stewart Island later today. Rain or showers tomorrow, mainly about Fiordland and Folau Strait. Chatham Islands, showers this evening. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. You're listening to Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Documents released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act have revealed the tensions between paramedics, their employer St John and the government amid ongoing strike action. A union representing paramedics had threatened partial strike action for tomorrow, but it's been cancelled after St John Ambulance lodged a court injunction. St John says the injunction was lodged in the interests of patient safety. But some St John paramedics say they're at breaking point and urgent change is needed. Alex Perrottet reports.
Dorothy Johnson is an emergency paramedic with more than 25 years' experience. She says she's never worked harder, and it's getting dangerous for staff and patients.
Your concentration is not as sharp. So we're having to drive in dangerous conditions. We're driving fast. We're thinking about the job that we're going to, what potentially could be wrong with this patient. Once we get there, we have to concentrate on treating the patient. You can't make a mistake when it comes to people's lives. But when you've finished that job and you're driving back to the station, you are absolutely stuffed. Seriously, it has taken its toll on you.
Union members say they gave up taking short 10-minute breaks they were entitled to because the unpredictable nature of the job made that impossible. So all the more important are the 2 30-minute breaks in their intense 12-hour shifts. But Dorothy says those breaks, protected under legislation, are being missed. Dorothy and others say they regularly don't get their first break before 7 hours into their shift and often don't get the second break at all. St John says the timing of call-outs means that sometimes those breaks can't happen if there's a major emergency. But with stretched staff, Dorothy says those exceptions are happening almost daily.
You know, we do a very important job. We never turn a job down. We don't just say, no, we're too tired, we can't go. We go and we do it. But please, running your ambulance service is a charity. It's ridiculous in this day and age.
Sarah Stone is the first union representative and says they gave notice of a partial strike on behalf of 1,000 ambulance officers back on May the 3rd, 2 weeks out from tomorrow, and had a conference call mediation arranged for Tuesday this week, but St John lodged the injunction on Monday. She says that was insulting.
It was disappointing, to say the least, that they haven't tried to find a way that we can work through it. And for us, it's a reflection on how St John feels about its workforce, and what the workers are hearing is they don't care enough about them to give them their breaks.
But St John disputes the information from First Union and says the injunction was lodged on Friday and the union cancelled the strike notice on Monday, meaning the scheduled meeting was not needed. It says it's negotiating in good faith. A St John ambulance report from June 2018 says frontline staff cost the charity $115 million that year, and it had an unfunded deficit of $13.5 million. In a February letter to the Health Minister David Clark obtained under the Official Information Act, St John's CEO Peter Bradley said the funding model needed an urgent overhaul and was no longer fit for purpose. He put that down to an increase in 111 calls and an inability to pay for additional staff. Mr Bradley urged the Minister to make the ambulance service a priority in this month's wellbeing budget, specifically for the government to boost funding from 70% to 95%. If the government doesn't comply, Mr Bradley said some services would have to be stopped. But even if there is more money for St John, Sarah Stone from First Union says there's a real worry that it won't get passed on to workers.
Morale is so low. We've been in industrial action since last November, and the messages that have come back from St John are so disappointing for their workers to hear.
In the meantime, burnt-out paramedics like Dorothy Johnson, who's currently on sick leave, are calling on the Finance Minister Grant Robertson to remember them as he plans his wellbeing budget. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
A fine has been handed down in the Christchurch District Court over one of the country's worst helicopter crashes in recent times. All 7 of those on board the single-engine Squirrel helicopter died when it plunged into a deep crevasse on Fox Glacier in 2015. They included 28-year-old pilot Mitch Gammeren and 6 tourists. Conan Young was in court and filed this report.
The then owner of Queenstown-based Alpine Adventures, James Patrick Scott, and the company in charge of quality assurance, Aviation Manual Development Limited, owned by Barry Waterland, had already pleaded guilty to breaches of the Health and Safety and Employment Act. Today, Scott was fined $64,000. Waterland's company was found to have no assets and avoided a fine due to its inability to pay. At one stage, Scott was called forward by Judge Kevin Phillips and asked if he had anything to say to the families of the victims who had packed the gallery and appeared via a video link from many places overseas. He turned and told them he was sorry. In his victim impact statement, the brother of pilot Mitch Gammeren, Brett Gammeren, told the court his death had left a gap in his life and that of his family.
Just feels like we are not complete without him. We will go through the rest of our lives feeling robbed of these memories that we would have been able to build, whether that be Mitch getting married and having children, or generally just having a fantastic life as we all thought he would. Mitchell Paul Gammeren, we are proud of you. You are a human that we all strive to be, loving, caring, passionate, strong and determined, and we will love you forever.
Among the passengers who died in the crash were Brits, Nigel and Cynthia Charlton. A friend of Nigel Charlton's family read a statement on behalf of his brother Clive.
The shock and loss the family initially experienced has been compounded by the length of time it has taken to get to the court hearing today. 3.5 years. Until there was an agreed summary of the facts and a guilty plea entered, we, the family, had virtually no information at all about the events leading up to the accident. We just didn't know what had happened.
Before sentencing, the lawyer for the Civil Aviation Authority, Stephanie Bishop, said the only training the pilot received was from somebody not qualified to provide that training.
The real culpability in respect of training lies in the fact that Mr Scott nor AMD could assure themselves that their pilots were adequately trained for the operations that they were undertaking.
The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has yet to release its report into why the crash occurred. Scott's lawyer, Garth Galloway, made the point that none of the failings dealt with in the charges caused the crash to occur.
The media have an absolute responsibility to report this matter fairly and to ensure that that is the context in which it is reported. Notwithstanding the very moving and wonderful victim impact statements that have been made.
Before today, Scott had already paid close to $900,000 in reparations to the 7 families, and today said he was happy to meet with them any time. The Commission has given no time frame for when it will release its report into what caused the crash. At the Christchurch District Court for Checkpoint, ko Konanyang tēnei.
It's almost 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The prospect of a new breakaway Christian party is winning support from Conservative quarters, but the National Party is downplaying this suggestion. It follows reports that National MP Alfred Naro has been in talks about setting up a new party focused on socially conservative issues. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
National's in need of mates when it comes to coalition wrangling, and it knows it. Without potential partners, ignoring one-man band act, it'll be an uphill battle to make it back into government. And this morning, all the talk was of a new friend in town.
There's talk they're about to set up a Christian party.
A breakaway Christian party. A new Christian party.
The idea is this: Alfred Naro, a National List MP, could quit the party and venture out on his own, targeting the Conservative, Christian and Pacifica vote. National could gift him the safe Auckland electorate of Botany, asking their supporters to vote for Mr Naro instead. National's leader Simon Bridges was quick to downplay the reports as rumour and speculation, but he hasn't rejected them outright. In a statement, he says options will appear, time will tell. And some voters in Botany seem open to it.
A lot of people are Christian around here, so surely they can win it.
Someone new coming in here would be great.
People here will always vote for National, whether the candidate's a blimmin' parrot, or not. It doesn't make any difference.
The Gambit's winning support from Conservative quarters too. The director of Family First, Bob McCoskrie, says such a party could push back against a more socially liberal government on issues like abortion, cannabis and euthanasia.
There is a morally conservative vote out there just waiting to be taken. If a party gets it right, they could hugely benefit.
In 1996, the Christian Coalition won 4.3% of the vote. In 2014, the Conservatives fell just shy of 4%. But with a safe electorate, a party would need just 2 or 3% to bring in extra MPs. Garth McVicker, a former Conservative Party candidate, says the time is right.
For National to ever be considered as a serious contender for government again, they need a partner. And I think the Conservative voice certainly needs to be heard in this country. So I don't see any downside to it at all, really.
Dame Winnie Laban was New Zealand's first female Pacifica MP, representing the Labour Party. She says a Conservative Christian party could feasibly win away some of Labour's support within the Pacific community.
There is still a strong Conservative, Christian, faith-based culture within the Pacific community, and I think a lot of these issues, people can also be very black and white about them.
She sounds a note of caution, though, to Mr Naro, a man she calls caring and intelligent, with leadership potential. The track record of fledgling minor parties, Conservative and otherwise, isn't great.
I don't know why he doesn't look at perhaps leadership potential in the National Party.
Starting a new party would be a major gamble for Mr Naro. It requires 500 financial members to start off, putting aside funding and volunteer support. Many would see it as cynical and contrived. It could crash and burn like so many small parties before it. A blue-green party called Sustainable New Zealand was announced earlier this year, but has yet to register, seemingly dropping off the radar altogether. Most likely, the national camp is simply sounding out the idea for political and public reaction, before deciding whether to send up that Hail Mary. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Oranga Tamariki has been accused of dropping a teenage boy off at a gang pad as punishment for being too cheeky. Hastings man DJ Brian posted a video on Facebook yesterday with the boy, claiming a social worker had taken him to a pad and left him there. Our Māori News correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
What I'm pissed off about is that this young fella here has been dropped off at the pad, threatened that if he wants to be a tough guy, she's going to drop him off at the pad. Anyway, I'm not even a pitch member, but he's at my house.
DJ Brian was clearly fuming when he shared the video yesterday, claiming the teenager, who we won't name, had just been dropped off at a gang pad by Oranga Tamariki. He said the social worker was attempting to scare the boy.
So what happened again, my boy? What's this lady reckon? Oh, she reckons if you keep being cheeky, I'm going to send you to the pad. And then she ended up turning around and taking me to the pad. So she took you to the pad because you was getting cheeky? Yeah.
The 2-minute video ends with Mr. Brian taking a stab at the ministry.
You just sort your shit out, man. You wonder why young Māoris like this go astray. You know, and then you go turn it around and blame it on him. But it ain't his fault.
Tens of thousands of people viewed it before it was taken down last night. Mr. Brian said on his Facebook page that the boy had been picked up by his nan and he had to delete the video. Oranga Tamariki is urging people not to keep sharing it. Its spokesperson Alison McDonald said in a statement that the video breaches privacy and could pose harm to a number of people. She says they're trying to wrap support around the boy and his wānau because of the attention that this is gaining on social media, but no comment about the claims. A leading Māori academic from Waikato University, Leonie Pihama, says that's not good enough.
Well, I think that response from the ministry is another example of how pathetic they are in terms of taking responsibility for what they're doing. And to bring forward the idea of wrapping care around the whānau, when we know that they clearly made a significant error in this case.
She says this is part of ongoing issues around how many Māori are being uplifted and what is happening to them when they're in state care.
You know, we see a young person who's been threatened and bullied by their social worker in order to try to change some kind of behaviour, and it's just appalling.
Last week, Ms Pihama hit the headlines by calling for the head of Oranga Tamariki to resign after a botched attempt to uplift a newborn baby at Hawke's Bay Hospital. The MP for Ikaroa Rapiti, Meka Waitiri, says the community needs to be brought in to help.
I've heard enough from midwives back home, from iwi chairs, from those that work in the sort of social area to say we can do better here, He Oranga Tamariki, and they're putting their hand up to be part of the solution.
DJ Brian was approached for comment but could not be reached. For Checkpoint, I'm Lee Marama McLaughlin.
A disabled Dunedin man who has waited more than 18 months for his bathroom to be modified is taking his fight to Parliament, hoping other people don't have to endure what he has. Joshua Perry launched a petition last month calling for the government to make homes more accessible for people with disabilities. His petition asked the government to speed up the process, and now it's on its way to Parliament. Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton filed this report.
Joshua Perry has cerebral palsy, and the narrow bathroom doorway and a raised lip on his shower means he can't use his wheelchair to get in.
It's quite difficult for me in terms of getting ready in the morning and stuff like that, so it will be good to have a new bathroom.
He says the paperwork he needed to fill out when he applied to the Southern District Health Board and support provider Enable New Zealand to get his home modified was unbelievable, and the delay has caused him a lot of stress. He's launched the petition to stop others from experiencing the same lengthy process, saying he's heard of some people waiting up to 2 years for changes to be made. More than 400 people signed the petition calling for a faster, more efficient process.
I thought if I'm suffering from this, there must be other people out there suffering from this, and I heard that there are quite a few people suffering from this issue.
Tim Marshall has been one of Mr. Perry's carers for about 3 months and says accessing the shower is a big problem.
It's raised and quite difficult and quite confined, so to actually lift him, Josh isn't that heavy, but it's still challenging, and quite awkward, so you often have to reach. I haven't had major back issues, but there have been times where I felt a little niggle here and there. It is a bit precarious at certain times.
Mr. Perry's dad, Ian, says they bought him his own home so he could live more independently. But the narrow doorways into the bathroom means his wheelchair can't fit through, so he has to be carried or use his walking frame. The estimated cost to modify the house is about $25,000, which would cover a new shower, toilet and automatic front door.
I think there's about 20 steps and it goes through different committees and there's back and forth with Enable who control the process, and it's just very slow. I mean, 2 years for a new bathroom is ridiculous. It's very difficult for his carers.
When a carer isn't available, Ian Perry steps in to do the lifting. He says there needs to be more assistance available to people with disabilities.
They've been historically highly marginalised in society. Even now I think we're just coming out of the dark ages in our attitude towards them.
Ian Perry says the government must do more to help people with disabilities. National List MP Michael Woodhouse accepted the petition in Dunedin this afternoon.
The situation was not only needy but dangerous if it wasn't done in a timely manner, not just for Josh but for his carers. And so we've been working with Josh over the last few months to make sure we could do what we could to push things along.
The modifications for Joshua Perry's house have been put out for tender. But while progress has been made, Mr. Perry says it should never have been this hard. He hopes the petition will make a difference for others.
I'm wanting a royal commission of inquiry into this issue. I want the Parliament to work together to get a bill set up so that people won't have to go through what I've been through in regards to this process.
He welcomes people who have experienced similar challenges to speak out. Associate Health Minister Julianne Genter acknowledged in a statement that the process for signing off house modifications can be a long one. The petition will be presented to the House of Representatives next Tuesday, and Mr. Perry hopes it will be in front of the Health Select Committee the next day. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tēnei.
New Zealand netball defender Casey Korpua will make her final appearance in domestic netball this weekend when the Bay of Plenty Magic take on the Mainland Tactics for the final round of the regular season on Sunday. After playing for the Magic for 16 years, she's hanging up the Magic dress to concentrate on life outside of the game. Netball reporter Ravinda Hunia reflects on the career of one of the nation's most revered netballers.
Casey Korpua, formerly Casey Williams. The name alone has been sending chills through her netball attacking foes for years, but it all ends this weekend. Korpua will play her last match for the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic, and despite a less than desirable result for her side, says the timing is right for her to hang up the dress for good.
The seasons have been obviously not what we wanted, but I guess that's just the way it goes, and starting to play good at the end of the season when it's a bit too late. That's life, that's experience of playing the game. So otherwise, I think we've got the right people and for the right reasons.
Korpua was recruited for the Magic in 2003 by current Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua in the former National Bank Cup competition. 16 years on, she has remained loyal to the Waikato, and despite numerous attempts by other franchises to lure her away, will finish her domestic career of 372 matches as a single franchise player.
Yes, I did receive other offers to go elsewhere, and I'm quite as people would know, I'm a family person and I don't like to go too far, from my family. But I also see Magic as a family too, so there was no reason, for me to go anywhere else, and I was very happy with, where I am.
It was those qualities that soon had the attention of national selectors. After featuring in the World Youth Championship winning team in 2005, Korpua made her Silver Ferns debut later that year. It set the tone come 2012 when Korpua and the Magic, along with teammates Laura Langman and Irene van Dijk, made history, becoming the only New Zealand side to ever win a Trans-Tasman competition title.
Huge rebound! The Magic are going to make history! And it's taken 5 years, but a New Zealand side has won.
Obviously, when we won in 2012, that was something that I'll never forget.
And, you know, you remember all the wins and the losses, but it's just the journeys, you know, the hard times and the good times that you go through with each team is something that I'll always remember.
The history-making didn't stop there. Kopua went on to captain the only Silver Fern squad to ever win a Constellation Cup series under Waimarama Taumonu, who says the win was thanks to Kopua and the Magic.
I think what people forget is that they were being rubbished at the start of the season, because I think they went none and 3 in their start. But they were clearly getting better as they went on, and they then went undefeated for the rest of the competition. And when you can feed off the back of a team like that, life's a little bit easier, really. I've got no doubt that the Magic provided the backbone for that Constellation Cup.
In 2014, Kopua broke a long-held record by captaining the Silver Ferns for a record 62nd time, a reign that was temporarily stopped soon after a knee injury sidelined her for 9 months. Taumonu, who like Kopua served as a Silver Ferns defender and captain, concedes players like Kopua don't come around too often and hopes her time with netball isn't over for good.
Coach has got a great game understanding. She's a wonderful person. I'm really hoping that she'll do some coaching. So, look, I think she leaves behind a legacy as one of the best players New Zealand's ever produced. And I'm really hopeful that she'll share the enormous game knowledge that she has with youngsters coming through, because she would have so much to offer in that field.
It's predicted that Sunday's match won't be the last we see of her, with Silver Fern selections less than a week away. But another season of domestic netball is most certainly off the cards.
For me, it feels right to move on to the next part of my life and, you know, get a bigger family. But also, the mind is willing and the body it's coping. It's doing what it needs to do at the moment. But I still want to be able to run around with my kids, you know, when I'm older.
Kopua's final outing with the Magic against the Tactics will be played on Sunday afternoon in Christchurch. Mo te hōtako o te ahi pōnei, ko Ravinda Hunia aho.
That's all we've got time for tonight. Catch you again next week. Have a wonderful weekend.